up, guys? It's your girl Matt Cox, and yes, I'm still at Trader Sam's in Disneyland. We are on the go, and so we are doing intros on the go. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. We are talking about the Baby Dinosaur quilt by Apples and Beavers. It's called Dinosaur Dreams, and if you have a baby and you're getting a quilt from me, this is a quilt that you're gonna get from me. It is the cutest. Oh, I love everything about this quilt. If you get a chance, check out the hashtag on Instagram. You'll see a ton of different options, a bunch of different colorways. There's one woman who even went so far as to flip the pattern. So she has two dragons that are facing each other, and I would love to do that. I wish I knew somebody who was having twins, because I would probably attempt to do it flipped. It's a relatively small, it's a baby quilt. You can certainly make it larger. She has some patterns that you can marry. And so she shows you how to use some of her patterns from one of her patterns and marry it to this one and make it larger. I think all the way up to a king. I think you could, maybe a queen. But you can do what you want to do. I almost enlarged this pattern, but I chose not to, just because I had already put the letters on there and I wasn't quite sure how that was going to look. I actually want one of these for myself. Again, it's the cutest. I had been dying for her to drop this pattern. I had been watching, and she was teasing, and I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And I thought I was going to be able to make 20 of them, but time is just not allowing for me to make as many as I'd like, as fast as I'd like. Okay, no worries. So, things to know about this. I suggest you print it out and copy the last page all the time. Don't cut up your original. Go on ahead and copy that. If you get a printed version, copy it. If you're printing it out at home, make sure you put it to the side. But the page where all of the letters are for the different pieces, they're how you're going to label your pieces. Leave that put together, then cut it apart as you're using it. And be extremely cautious with that, because there's so many pieces, it feels like a lot. And it's been a while since I've been working with 3-yard quilts so much, so it felt like, oh my gosh, this is so many pieces. It's not that bad. Once you get them all cut out and you start assembling it, it actually goes quite quickly. But there are quite a few pieces and they're labeled, but I didn't realize that they are labeled like AA and capitalized AA. That will catch you off guard if you're not ready. So be really, really cautious about that, because you'll have lowercase VV and uppercase VV, and you know that looks the letter looks the same. Does that make sense? So you'll get a lowercase V and an uppercase V, and if you're not paying attention, you will switch them. So that's something. As far as the pattern goes, I think she did a really good job. I kind of wish that they were labeled a little different, but it's not a big deal at all. I think she did a really good job with it. It's just there are quite a few little pieces. When you're looking at the pattern also, on the left hand side, she shows you how to cut the pieces if you're using yardage, and the other one if you're using a fat quarter. I got confused. I thought I was going to need to cut all of that, so don't let that overwhelm you either. What else was it about that pattern? I think those are the major things about it. Again, it's super cute. I went ahead and customized mine with letters. So I went ahead and put the baby's name on this quilt. Again, it's a smaller quilt. It's not super huge. I used my Cricut to do that. I'm going to go ahead and drop that Cricut footage in here too, so that you can see how I did it. I used stabilizer with my applique for the first time. That changes my applique game. I don't know why I wasn't using stabilizer before. I was using iron-on, but not actual like stabilizer, and that made such a difference. It's such a pristine look when you are appliquing. I show you guys just a little bit of me going around it with the blanket stitch. I like to use a blanket stitch for my applique, and it's raw edge applique. It's not turned, and I use my Cricut to cut out the letters, which is why I like having a Cricut for fabric cutting. You know, I'm gonna do a video coming up about when to use a Cricut, when to use your AccuQuilt, and the difference between why and when you use which machine. But all that to say, I really, really enjoy this quilt. I hope you guys check her out. Again, it's Apples and Beavers who made this quilt pattern. It's her Dragon Dreams. They even have a little one where you can customize and put a little crown on it. It's so cute. I can't think of anything else to tell you guys about this pattern. Maybe I'll think of it as I'm doing the voiceover. But until then, I will see you guys later. Bye-bye. Okay, let's get started on this Dragon Dreams quilt. I don't know how come I kept saying dinosaur. I am obsessed with this quilt. Again, I had stalked her. She talked about this quilt probably like 6 months before she was ready to drop it, which drives me insane. I can't wait that long. So the first thing you should do when you get a quilt pattern like this with a bunch of pieces is go through and read the whole thing. It says that most patterns tell you read the whole pattern before you start. And even when you do that, you'll probably still miss some stuff. Lord knows I did. If you look at the color patches to the left on the paper, you'll see that it's two of the same color. If I had bought like fat quarters or smaller pieces, she shows me how to cut it, and then she shows me how to cut yardage. I have yardage, and I've chosen to use grunge fabric, which is amazing. I am obsessed with grunge, so much so that I'm gonna order a whole color swatch card of grunges so that I can just keep track, pull, and know what's going on in the grunge world, because I think they are the best blenders ever. Look at this. Look at the color story in here. If this doesn't lend itself to this quilt, I don't know what does. You see the lime green? I just want to go and pet that fabric right this second. Now, of course, I can't give you any of the dimensions because this is not my pattern, but I will show you me putting together pretty much the whole quilt. So, hopefully you think this will be a good time, but it's a lot of repetition. But I recorded it, and if there's some tricky parts here, so if you just want to watch me put together this entire quilt, keep hanging out. If not, you might want to skip around to the section where I do a little of the Cricut work, or I don't know. I don't know. We're just going to hang out while I give you my tips and tricks on putting this quilt together. So like I said, there are a lot of little pieces, but once you get them all cut out, it's a good time. It's not bad. It's an easy sew. It's a fun sew. The quilt is not huge. It's so little. I thought it was much bigger than it is. I want to say it's like 30 by 40. It's a little guy. It's not a big quilt at all, which is very nice because when I took it to the quilter, it did not cost me a bunch of money, which makes me very, very happy. So I like that she has you cut these out in strips, and then from the strips you subcut, which is great. I do not suggest cutting apart all of these letters beforehand. I think you should cut them out as you go. And if you want, and you don't want to have a bunch of pins in your stuff everywhere, go on ahead and use Wonder Clips to clip it to the piece as you do it. It's really important that you keep these together and you pay attention to what you're doing. I kind of wish, like, you see how it's the peach section at the top? I wish that all the letters in the peach section were like A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I wish they were in order, but they're not. They kind of jump around. So, you have to be careful. So this is what all the pieces look like cut out. There's only what, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 4 or 5 colors, which is nice. At least the way that I've chosen to do it. You do it however you want to do it. But it's not a ton of colors, which is, again, nice. But look at how small some of them are. I think those are like smaller than 1 inch. I don't know. They're tiny little pieces. But what you're about to see me do is what you see me do throughout this entire quilt for the most part. 90% of this quilt is drawing a line down the center of a square or a rectangle and sewing on that line and cutting away from it a 1/4 inch. That's pretty much this entire quilt. That's pretty much it. So at this point I have sewn down the line, and I use a friction pin to mark my stuff. I know some people don't like friction pins. Some people prefer chalk markers, the disappearing markers. Grab your marking pin of your desired marking tool. And that wood iron over there is excellent to have. I was so thankful to have that little tool for this quilt because a lot of these seams need to be pressed open. And I love to use that tool prior to me actually pressing it with the iron. When I want seams open, this is what I use every time before I press it with an iron. So you'll see me going back and forth to that tool quite a bit. Now the first section is putting together the dragon's head. So I'm working on his nose right now. And I love how you do this little tooth, which can be kind of tricky because you're like, wait, am I doing this right? But yes, half of that is just a scrap, and you're going to measure from the top and the bottom the way that she says, and then you're going to sew it, and you're going to have some overhang, which is going to feel strange, but that's correct, exactly how you see it. I have some overhang, not a big deal, just going ahead and trim it after you're finished. And that was one of the parts that I thought was a little tricky. I mean, not super tricky, I mean, I figured it out, but it's just something that you're probably not doing often. Now, when you use one of your pieces, I suggest that you do not throw away. If you see, I've got a wonder clip over there, and every time I use a piece, I go on ahead and just clip it on the top. The reason why I do that is if I mess up something, I can go back and say, what piece did I think this was? It's a great way to keep track. If you put it in the trash can, it's gone. You don't know. And I wouldn't use these over again because I like labeling them fresh and cutting them from a fresh strip. So those are just some tips and tricks that I suggest. Do not throw away your letters as you use them, because at one point I used, I think, a lowercase, or I don't know, I used a piece that was not the right size, and I had to revisit that, and luckily I was able to go back and say, okay, this is where it went wrong. I like the assembly of this little ear right here. It reminds me of when I did the Bears by Elizabeth Hartman, or is it Violet Craft? Whoever does the Born Bears, I forget. I get them mixed up so much. I don't know why. But the way you put that little ear together is pretty much the way you put together a lot of those ears for the Born Bear, the Bjorn Bear. Can you see the nose? Can you guys see it coming together? Isn't it cute? Oh my gosh. And once you get to this part, you are cooking with gas. You're like, all right, I get it. And then she'll have you put together this whole section. Matter of fact, this whole quilt is kind of broken up into 3 or 4 sections that you work on. I mean, I guess all, well, no, I don't know how all quilts are, but this one is kind of cool in that way. It's like you do the head, then you do like the body, and then you do the tail, and then it all comes together. Look at that. Isn't that cute? There is one section that I did that did not line up perfectly, and I left it because you guys have met me before, you know. It takes a lot for me to seam rip something. I don't have time for that. Now, with your marking instruments, make sure you have something that will mark on black. I like to do that ceramic pencil by So Fine. I think it's So Fine. I love that thing. I use it constantly. And now we're putting together the claw. And this quilt took me, I think it took me like 4 days to do. I wasn't sewing as hard or as fast as I usually do, but it doesn't have to take a long time. This is definitely can be done within a week, probably a weekend if you are sewing hardcore. But I think it took me like 2 days to do the cutting for the fabrics. I wasn't rushing it. Ooh, look at that. Isn't that paw cute? I love this color story. Grunge fabrics make my heart sing. So we're doing more sewing down the line, and then you just cut a 1/4 inch from the line. There's only, I think, one time when you sew a 1/4 inch from the line as opposed to sewing on the line. You've got to be careful and pay attention, because there is, I think, one time when you do need to sew, again, a 1/4 inch away from the line as opposed to sewing directly on the line. So here we are, just flipping and stitching, and she tells you which direction to press the seam. She tells you which seams need to be open, and if you pay attention to that, you will have great success with this lining up and actually just not being bulky, because there are a couple of places where a few seams are going to come together, and it would create bulk if you do not press your seams open or the right direction. Okay, so now we've got 2 legs and a head. Did you see that? Now we need to start working on these wings. Now this is this where I went left? Yeah, I think this is the one that I had to totally remake, because when I was cutting the fabrics, I must have just swapped out a scrap versus the piece that I actually needed, and it caused this to be the incorrect size. And I was like, oh my gosh, she has an error in her pattern. No, she doesn't. I do. I'm the error. User error all the time. This is also a little tricky one right here, where you need to mark the diagonal, but you can't see with the end of the fabric on the other side. So I used the lines on the cutting mat to help me here. And then I was able to get it, but I was struggling with this little piece here. And this is on the wing. And then I figured it out, and now we can go on ahead and sew it together. And I had to give that a little snug tug. You guys know how that goes. Sometimes you gotta pull on it just a smidge to make it fit. And I like this piece because you keep building and building and cutting away, and sometimes it takes some courage. You're like, am I supposed to be cutting all that fabric away? And I know people who love to do scrappy quilts, this one will produce quite a few of those little triangles because of the way that we are assembling it with cutting, sewing on the diagonal and then cutting away. You're going to produce some scraps. You see that? Scraps galore. Ooh, look at that wing. Doesn't it look gorgeous? I am pleased. Look at all these little pieces. Worth it though. Worth every little piece. Now see this one? This is an interesting one because I have to line it up all the way to the right and then sew it. So you got to be careful not to line it up the other direction, because that's just the kind of thing that I would do. This is the piece that I screwed up. That orange piece, I don't know what scrap piece that was, but I didn't check the dimension before I started sewing. And that's another way to just be sure that you're not going to have any mistakes, is check the dimension against the pattern to be sure that you have the right one. I mean, it's an extra step and it will save you, because I had to remake this entire thing. Luckily, I had enough fabric to do so, because this little thing right here was too short, and I just was like, where is the error? Hard to find when all these things are sewn together. But you'll see it in a second, because I totally show you that I made a piece that is definitely too small to fit, and I could see it happening. So in the bottom left, that's the right size. Look in the top right over there by my apple. Always food. It is so much smaller, and it was not fitting that piece on the top at all. I was like, what on earth? See how much smaller that is? It's like a whole inch smaller. And now when I sew that bottom piece together, it matches up with the top, which is what I needed. I was struggling for a second. Matter of fact, I think I had to walk away from it, because I think this is a whole new day. See me checking now? See, that's what happens when you make a mistake. You start checking all your pieces. Yeah. Had I done that before, it would have saved me remaking that and being frustrated for a day. And now we are working on the spines. Is that what they are? Spines? Yeah, I think that's what we call them. I don't know. But for this one here, I don't know why, but it was coming out kind of wonky. I don't know what kind of sewing I was doing on these, but once I pressed them really good, I hit them with the starch as hard as I could, and they laid really nice and flat for me. So some more diagonal. I'm telling you, 90% of this quilt is drawing diagonal lines, sewing on them and cutting away. Oh, I want to make another one of these right now. I would love to do one in some girly colors. Maybe some pinks and purples, something like that. Maybe a dragon in blue. Maybe I'll do a girly one in blue. I don't know. I don't have time for this. I just want to do another dragon. I want one for myself. There's such a cute quilt, such a great pattern. This might be my favorite pattern of 2021, maybe. We'll see. At the end of the year, I can't wait to tell you guys my fabrics of this year and my pattern of the year. You see how that's overhanging? Don't freak out. It's supposed to be like that. You're going to trim it to fit. Boy, I can just imagine what goes into making a pattern. You know, it's all fun and games on the graph paper until it comes time to try to figure out how to make it work. Go apples and beavers. I wonder what that name means. I'm going to link it in the description bar so you guys can see her different sizes, her variations, how she marries these quilts to her other quilt patterns, which is genius, because then you're buying all her patterns. What? She's a genius. We love her. And here are some smaller little pieces, which again get a little funky when you're trying to figure out now where exactly is the diagonal, like where is that lime green? And so I used the marking on the mat to hit that diagonal. by laying the green first and then laying the white on top of it, and then I'm able to see exactly where that diagonal goes. I struggled with that for a while before I got that right. I'm like, how do I see it? Use what you got. And that ruler that I'm using is a Creative Grids ruler, which clearly has frosted lines on the quarter inch, which is why I've been using that ruler pretty much for this entire project. I think that's a 2.5 by 12 or 12.5 inch ruler, which is one of my staples. You guys know that I love Quilter Select rulers, but I have some Creative Grids that I use on a regular, and that's definitely one of them. Alright, and now this one here, I wasn't paying attention, and you see where I'm marking it? That line needs to be going the opposite direction. So I've sewn it, and I realized that I couldn't get it right, so now we're picking with my favorite seam ripper. Call it Jack, of course. And now we are going to, I ironed that with the iron and got rid of that friction marking pen, and now we're going to do the diagonal line in the proper direction. There we go. And then I was like, wait, where do I cut away? So I rolled it back and then I could see it. This one tripped me up just a little bit. And that is one of the spines on the tail, I think. So now we are really cooking with gas. If you've made it this far with me, you are committed to this video. Now you've got to just stick with me. And we're pretty much to the end as far as this dragon is concerned. That white is the background. That white is also grunge fabric too, and it just so happens to have a touch of that same aqua color in it. Oh, you guys, grunge fabric gives me life. I am here for it. It's such a pretty, it's not pure white, but it's got just a little something to it. You guys have got to see this quilt in person. So now we sew all the little spines together, and you come up with this piece here. It's a panel, and you can kind of see where it goes on the dragon, and that's the top of his tail. I don't know what that piece is. This is the bottom. Oh yeah, it's the bottom. I am building what you see on the right, and then this guy here goes on, and now we have this full piece. Okay, so this was a little weird. I was like, wait, what piece do I sew to which piece to get it to all come together? Because these two at the bottom are separate. That one is separate. This one is separate. And then, you know, we just sewed that whole thing together that I'm touching now. So what I ended up doing is sewing the wing to, there's a white panel up there. You'll see it in just a second. So I sewed the wing to the panel on top of it. That's one piece. And then I was able to sew it to the right piece, and then I sewed those two together. Then this is so crazy. You guys see how it goes together now, right? I hope you guys saw that. It took me a minute to figure it out, but hopefully you guys saw how it all goes together. It's a little puzzle. So I should have numbered that. Maybe I'll go back and just number how I sewed it to what. I don't know. We'll see. This is a piece of heat and bond. It is the purple one, which is the light bond. And I traced it. I traced the little pattern of the eye onto the paper. That I heated the paper onto the fabric. And I cut it out. I have not sewn the head to the quilt yet. Now I am putting the eye on there, and I left it like this so that it was easier to applique down. Alright, let's get these letters going. So I'm in my Design Space software with the Cricut, and this is the thing that where the Cricut really sings in regards to fabric. When I want to do custom names or letters, I don't have to worry about it because I have every font that I have in my computer, and it's not like Maccouture where you only have the one, you know, or two or maybe three different fonts in different sizes. This is completely customizable, and again, this is where the Cricut sings, in my opinion. I will do a video about when you use a Cricut and when you use your Maccouture. So what I did was I duplicated the name Jacob a bunch of times, and then I grabbed all the different fonts that I thought I might like. Then I stacked them up next to each other, and then I just started weeding out the ones that I didn't love. I'm looking at them. I swear the one on the right looks like dragon-like claws to me, and I couldn't make up my mind, like, do I want to do this one or this one? And so I took a vote, and everybody voted this one. So now I just went ahead and started to change the size of the letters. I think I decided to do each one at about 6.5 inches high, and I didn't change the orientation as far as what it comes out to, right or left. I just made the height what I needed it to be so that it fit in that white section. I feel like this quilt was meant for you to be able to put a 5-letter name, probably more, but I really don't want to put a name on here that has more than 5 or 6 letters. Which is funny because my name has 6 letters. Because when I tell you appliquing is no walk in the park, like, it takes a minute. I was on the phone for a long time while I was sewing around these letters. And I sew around the outside and the inside of the letters. So the way that I did it was I ironed some more heat and bond, and then I just cut the letters out. And here they are, all laid out on the ironing board, getting ready to be pressed. And this is a piece of the stabilizer that I used. I used it behind the eye as well as behind the letters. And I just put it back there and then stitched around it. And that's exactly what I did with the applique letters too. I think I cut close to around it, but look at how clean that applique is, guys. What? Clean. Oh, it's just, it makes me very, very happy. And there's the quilts all put together. Look at Jacob's quilts. Now here it is, officially done with the quilting. And I think I show you guys the back. I put a Thomas panel on the back. And I also made a little cushion to go with it. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope you made it all the way through this. If you're here, you did, and here are a couple more videos. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.